Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host who is ready to help your team drive digital results, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. I'm Sean Callanan, and welcome to episode 347 of Sports Geek. This week, I chat with Rodica Titeica. She's the Director of Marketing, Australia and New Zealand for Subway. Really looking forward to this chat, diving in with Rodica on all things sponsorship from a sponsor's point of view. Rodica was recently on a panel at Money in Sport, and I invited her back to dive in on her strategy around all things Subway, partnership with Football Australia, and the Socceroos and the Matildas, and what they're looking to do going forward. It's a really good listen, especially if you are out there selling rights and want to bring in a partner like Subway, but also how do you go about making that pitch and tailoring that pitch. So that will be coming up. You might be listening to this episode at our website, sportsgeekhq.com. You can find every single episode of the podcast at sportsgeekhq.com. And if you are looking for someone to help you review what you're doing in the digital space, it might be a full audit of everything you're doing in digital. It might be something looking at your social media platforms. It might be something just simply around one of your campaigns. Please reach out, Sean at sportsgeekhq.com, or book in for a phone call, sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. I love hearing from podcast listeners. So if you're trying to solve that problem of how do we do it, how do we resource it, how do we get to the next level, that's the stuff that I love diving in on. So please reach out. Now, please enjoy this interview with Rodica Titeica, Director of Marketing for Australia and New Zealand at Subway. Very happy to welcome Rodica Titeica. She's the Director of Marketing from Australia and New Zealand for Subway. There you go. I keep giving you the pause of saying anyone can stuff it up, and I stuff up the intro. But Rodica, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I feel a little bit more at ease now that you've done the first stuff up.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the old step on the rake, get it whack on your face. But we did catch up recently at Money in Sport up on the Gold Coast, and
we did.
The panel was a good conversation, but for mine, you don't get to go deep enough. So that's why I invited you back. So if you haven't listened to that episode, highly recommend go back in your podcast player to do. Normally what I do when I get my guests on is ask them how they got their start in sports. And you've got a long career across marketing and comms and PR. So you're not in this pure sport role with a lot of my guests are. What was your sort of first foray into sports and using sponsorship as a means to reach customers?
Yeah, great question. And thanks for having me on, Sean, and for all your listeners. So I think the first, I guess I've always, as you mentioned, been in either PR or comms, marketing in one sense or another. And sports partnerships have somehow, been part of something that I've done at all levels. And I think that speaks to the strength of what the opportunity can bring to brands. And probably my first foray into a sports-related partnership was while I was working in a PR agency. So working with multiple brands and working with multiple partners. So whether it be, I remember doing PR for individual sports people, so a lot of, reputation management and trying to bolster their personal profile outside of a team, as well as working with, bringing together brands and sporting teams. So I've worked across, netball partnerships and negotiated those and brought those to life. I worked when I was at Good Life Health Clubs. So obviously really nice synergies there. And most of my businesses that I've worked in have been multi-site. So that means lots of sites around Australia, meaning that the brand needs access into lots and lots of different locations and communities. So sports is such a perfect way to do that. So whether it be netball, I've also worked in NRL, of course AFL. So I negotiated the partnership with Essendon Football Club when I was at Amart Furniture, and that's an ongoing naming rights partnership with co-partnership with Fujitsu. And that's been exceptional for the brand and continues on. I've also worked in motorsport as well, and of course AFL and of course football, and now with Subway Socceroos and the Comeback Matildas, which has been terribly exciting.
And so just to go back, because like you said, sort of in that PR spurt, you're sort of in that execution space. But when you were, you were general manager, customer for Amart, and it was, where the brand was positioned and to get, naming rights, which, on the jumper, which is, for our US friends, they don't get logos on the jumpers. They're only or on the jerseys. They're only just starting to scratch the surface. But that's a prime bit of real estate, in the AFL world. What was the positioning for Amart to say, hey, we want our name out there. We want them on Friday night footy with a big club like Essendon? What were some of the reasonings behind, taking on, co-major sponsorship for an AFL team? Because that's a really big investment in the Australian market.
It's huge, you're right. And I'd love to say that that happened by design, but it was all the planets had to align, because for anybody, particularly in Australia and even for the international guests, you'll know that the opportunity to partner with, a top line premium sports team doesn't come along all the time. They're very few and far between. And in fact, if we're talking AFL, Geelong has the longest partnership in the history of any partnership, sporting partnership anywhere on the planet with Ford, which is, incredible when you think about it. And AFL these are some of the oldest clubs in the world, sporting clubs, beats baseball, basketball, anything around the world. So the heritage that is attached to these clubs, and then the partnerships like Geelong and Ford is incredible. So they don't come along very often. So when I was at Amart, the opportunity was about repositioning the brand, and I had done that a little bit with some of our brand work, but we really knew that we needed to get change the perception of the brand. And I always talk about, popular and famous by association. So that was really what we were trying to do, align ourselves with a brand that had deep fandom and die-hard sort of connections to fans all across Australia, not just in Melbourne. So the good thing about sport is it reaches you wherever you are. You don't have to be in that local market. So that was the sort of set us off into, well, what opportunities are there? And I started investigating and reaching out. Also, I forgot to mention cricket as well. So we partnered with, we dipped our toe in the water with Sydney Cricket, and that was fantastic. A wonderful, wonderful group of people. And it worked really well. So we thought, how we can activate, how we can get our message in front of consumers where there's permission to engage, so that's kind of what sports does. And then we just kept looking for new opportunities. And we also did the Parramatta Eels. And then, as luck would have it, we just timed it and we put it out to all the clubs and a lot of codes, and just trying to find the right fit. And as it so happened, Essendon was in the middle of renegotiating a co-major. So they re-signed Fujitsu, and they were in talks with somebody else, another brand, and that fell through. And so literally that week it happened when I was just linked on LinkedIn, busily trying to connect. So it's for a brand like Amart to have a connection with such an iconic brand like Essendon. Now, I have full disclosure, it was my CEO's team as well. And it actually happened. It does help. It helps get the sign off when the final figure comes through. And it also happens to be my team. So, but that was certainly not by design. It was just what was available at the moment. So we obviously thought it was a lot more than Amart had ever invested in any partnership or any single one activity. So it was a big gamble, but one that, it was very measured, and we went through every single attribute of the partnership, what we get, tried to leverage as much as possible. And it was really about getting Amart into the hearts and minds through a culturally relevant avenue, and reaching the right audience segment for the brand. And that partnership continues on today. Yeah,
that's the bit that I'm always interested in, especially those big levels. It's either a brand, like you said, Amart, looking to elevate themselves, put them into a different conversation, elevate the brand, which, I think very much succeeded. There might have been people before that announcement, not know the brand, not know where it is, so it really builds that recognition. Then in 2020, you come to Subway and it's not in that same space. It's not a challenger. It's a known brand. So then when you're looking out to the market from a sponsorship opportunities for Subway, what was the lens? What were you looking for when you started to look, what are the opportunities? Where should we be? How should we connect? What best builds, a really strong foundation Subway's got when you're looking at the sports space, which sort of, maybe is the prelude to, your partnership with FFA. What were some of the things you were looking at when you came into the role and sort of looked at Subway as a brand and then looked at some of those opportunities?
Look, it was, as you mentioned, I started on the 2nd of January of 2020. And I always, as I mentioned on the panel, it's kind of COVID and I share an anniversary because not long after that, everything went into shutdown. But it's interesting that you say we weren't a challenger brand at that time, because we certainly were. Subway as a brand started by being completely different and disrupting the industry. And over time, what we found was, we had our heyday and we grew and grew and grew and height of popularity. And then, the dining and quick service restaurant market just sort of expanded. And certainly with with COVID brought additional challenges, because then everything was about convenience and getting it where I am as a customer, where I am, when I want it, how I want it, and whatever I want. So QSR kind of lost its edge a little bit. So we had to pivot. And at that stage, I just started and my remit was certainly about repositioning the brand again, because we'd become a little bit stale. We had become a little bit beige and rested on our laurels for a long time on the attributes of the brand, because we are the original disruptor. So no, people love it this way. And my fear, and I say this to my team all the time, is that we were going to blockbuster our way into an early retirement for some of us. So we certainly wanted to do something. So we set about repositioning the brand again, and that was about, we'd lost top of mind, we'd lost relevance. The issue for Subway was, everybody knows it, people think about it, but then we lose in consideration because, and then all of the consumer research and testing and insights told us, I like you, I know you, but I just don't care enough to bother. So there's nothing different, nothing's evolved. So we set about that whole brand repositioning. And so sitting here 3.5 years, nearly 4 years later, probably 2 years in, we needed to get our house in order first. So we needed to reposition the brand first. There's no way that we could have entered into a meaningful partnership of this scale 4 years ago, being where we were. So we needed to reinvigorate life into the brand and bring back some personality. And then it was about, how do we become more culturally relevant? And we were trying, we'd done a lot to insert ourselves into culture. And for anyone who knows, whether it's sports, whether it's food, and I've always worked in the leisure industry. So hotels, tourism, retail, whatever it might be, health and fitness. And now in QSR, the same premise applies, and you've got to connect with the consumer. Otherwise, they're sport for choice. And, with the phone in our pocket, in our hand, I can get anything from anywhere, anytime. So making us a brand of choice was what this was all about. So we actually set about probably 2 years ago, starting to investigate a partnership with tennis. And we were in discussions with Tennis Australia about the Hot Shots program, because again, we couldn't afford, nor did we really think the benefit for us. We don't have Kia size budgets. We don't have McDonald's size budgets. So for us to sponsor a tournament, that much money in a very small period of time, we thought, let's get into community through Hot Shots. So we explored that quite deeply, because again, it was about, and with QSR as an industry, there are some very stringent regulations in around advertising to children. Even though we are the better for you brand and the better choice, it's still a QSR brand, no matter which way you slice and dice it. So this was one way for us to access grassroots and get into those communities. And we looked at it very closely. And again, I actually made the decision. We were ready to go, but I had to pull out of that because we had other things to get our house in order. We weren't quite there yet. It was unfortunate because it had all the makings of a beautiful partnership that would have ticked all the boxes for us. However, we weren't ready. We didn't have the resource to do it justice. And I think that's one of the key things when you are considering a partnership. as I mentioned before with the Amart, an example, all the planets aligned, and timing was just, it fell in our lap. So that was a beautiful opportunity to take advantage of. It doesn't always happen that way. And in the case of Subway, we weren't in a position to properly activate and leverage the opportunity and do the partnership justice at that point in time. So we pulled out.
I think it's a really good point. Like you'd identified what you wanted to do and how you wanted to do it. But again, if you expect the rights holder to do all of the heavy lifting and to just solve the problem for you, it's a really flawed way of going into the partnership. Because you want to be able to leverage and activate those assets. And if you're like, great, we're going to have all these assets, but we don't have the resources, or we don't have our brand work done, or we don't have the partners in place to be able to really take advantage of it, then it's, it is money down the drain. That's where a lot of failed sponsorships happen, where they go, like, either it gets pushed in because of a budget year, or because you've got, or there's a certain, we'll go ahead and we'll hope that it works. It's not really, hope is not a strategy, as they say.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And that was where I felt like we were going to do our brand damage, given what the objective of a brand alignment was. It was about to lift the brand, and it was about all of those, positive benefits that we discussed at the start. But ultimately, if we were going to fail in execution, then it was throwing good money after bad, and also wasn't going to be of any benefit to Tennis Australia. And that's ultimately when I look at any brand partnership, whether it be sport or anything, it's about, all of the alignments. It's got to be, for me, genuine and an authentic fit. I don't want to be square pegging a round hole and trying to make it work. And particularly when we looked at something like Essendon, what's in it for the members? And that was a discussion that I'd had with their commercial team for a long time. It's got to be good for Amart and our customers. It's got to be good for Essendon and their fan base and their members, and they pay their membership. So it's got to be good for the club, of course. So if it doesn't tick all boxes and we can't succeed on all levels, it's not about whacking a logo on a jersey and hope, as you say, hope is not a strategy, and hoping for the best that we get the results. It's about, that's just the start, right? That's what you negotiate and trade on, the value of the deal, and then it's obviously the exposure. And then for us, it's okay, well, then what? What do we do with it? How do we leverage it?
So from that exercise of looking at, the options with TA and, your budget, sort of setting your sights on some of the options, was really grassroots and activation and sort of reaching that broader community one of the main focuses that you still said, we like that. We like that idea. That's something that we want, that sort of led to, was sort of the kernel of potentially what you wanted to do with FFA down the track?
100%. Yeah, you're right. And it was really hard to let go of that partnership because, again, it doesn't come around all the time. It's a very competitive market. So with an asset like that, everybody will want to be a part of it. And we knew that if we let it go, we may not get that opportunity back. So, but that was just a call we had to make sure that we had the right, ability to focus on what we needed to for the business first, because, if we can't deliver on the partnership, we're not going to be able to deliver commercially. So commercial objectives came first, and we wanted to make sure we were doing that right. Now, fast forward to probably August last year, my managing director and I were sitting in the airport lounge, the Qantas lounge in Adelaide, and we'd just been visiting some franchisees and having meetings. And I kept getting this call from an unknown number, and it was Tom from Football Australia, and he'd been actually trying to get to us for the last 2 years since we were actually in discussion with Tennis Australia, and it's through our agency, through publicists. And I'd said, no more discussions about partnerships. We're not ready. And Tom, bless his socks, was super persistent, and I answered this call in the lounge, and he said, look, I've been trying to get you. I've got this great opportunity. The World Cup is coming up, in Qatar. We need a sponsor. And I said, look, okay, look, can you just, he was trying to get a meeting with Shane and I, our MD. And I said, if you can just send me a proposal, we can review it. I said, I don't feel like we're in a position to financially or whatever. And he sent it, and literally within 10 minutes of reading it, Shane and I looked at each other and thought, we can't not do this. This is ridiculous. So it was probably the fastest deal I've ever done in my entire life, because, and certainly from Subway's perspective, because our legal process is quite protracted. So 21 days from when we had that conversation to when we signed the deal. So covering everything from what is in this for the next 3 years to what are we going to do in the next, 45 days in Qatar. Relating to Qatar. So obviously it's a FIFA event, so we can't activate over there because we're locked out. But what could we do to leverage that immediately here in Australia? So it was an opportunity that we couldn't pass on. It was an excellent brand. And for us being, we are, as I mentioned, we were stale for a long time. We'd lost our way. We stopped standing for anything. And over the last 3.5, 4 years, what I've tried really hard with my team and our agency partners to do is give the brand some personality again. Having said that, we're still very much a family brand, so we can't go too far. And when you're looking at partnerships, there were some cautions around we can't be seen partnering with NRL. Sports players sometimes do naughty things, and we certainly don't want to, we don't want to go from 0 to 1,000 for our brand in terms of how we're aligning. And we felt like soccer in Australia, so football, was the perfect vehicle because it gave us both men's and women's. We really identified and could connect with the values and what they were trying to achieve in growth for the women's sport and also for the profile for the men's sport. Obviously, marquee sporting opportunities with the Men's World Cup in Qatar, the Women's World Cup that we've just hosted here in Australia and New Zealand. We've got Australia Cup, we've got Asia Cup. But then the next layer down, which was the key, the deciding factor for us was being able to get into grassroots. So Subway is truly, even though we're a global master brand, I think we're a very local brand, right? So we are owned by there are 800 or 850 individual franchisee operators around Australia. That's 850 family businesses, essentially. So you don't know who owns your local Macca's. It's someone exceptionally wealthy who is 3 times removed, who invests in it and runs a very successful business. There we have a lot of multi-unit owners who own multiple franchises and have done exceptionally well, but we also have a lot of ma and pa, individual business, they're just small business operators, and they often live in those communities. Their kids go to the local school, they play football at the local clubs. So we are probably, in my mind, the true, genuine community QSR brand or brand that can operate in that space. So the ability to connect with over 1,500 football clubs, soccer clubs across Australia, to me that was, and Shane, our MD, was the selling factor in, okay, this is something that we can really sink our teeth into. Now, it also was something that we felt that gave us clear space as a brand, something that we could own. KFC has cricket, McDonald's has virtually everything. We're locked out of a lot of properties. So this was something that we could own nationally, internationally, and most importantly, all the way down through into our communities. So, and speaking to Tom and Taylor and, JJ, everybody at Football Australia, they're just good humans. And that was really important to us too. We want to do good business with good people who we know that, this thing will work because we've got each other's interests at heart and there's good alignment.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the conversations I had with JJ, James Johnson, from the FFA. One of their biggest assets was that grassroots network of, the amount of young kids, boys and girls, playing football, and that has only increased since the Matildas, with the amount of kids going to football and saying they want to kick the round ball around. And I think, from our discussions of money in sport, the fact that you have got, stores, bricks and mortar stores, people who are embedded in the community. I'm sure a lot of your franchisees were probably already sponsoring local clubs and local cricket and football and clubs because they're part of the community. But now they've got these assets and these rights that they can leverage. I guess the thing that I wanted to, the reason you didn't go ahead with, the stuff with tennis and you were able to take on board that opportunity was the amount of work you did with the brand. Like we can see over your shoulder, Team Fresh and some of the work that you'd done, to be able to be ready for it. It was again, like you said, perfect timing that your team had done the work. You had a brand that was ready to roll out, that was ready to partner, with the Socceroos, with the Matildas, with football in general. It was really important to make it the right time.
Do you know what? That's probably the most critical thing, because it's not it's not simply if we build it, they will come. And what we've talked about a lot is, and obviously since our Football Australia partnership, we're being approached a lot by other businesses to partner with them as well in all sorts of sporting and across all levels. And as much as I'd love to do that, we're obviously very loyal to what we've got with FA here, and we want to make sure that goes really deep. But the fact that our brand was in the position that it was in, I think, is critical and really crucial to point out that Football Australia were chasing us. So in the past, in my experiences, look, of course, smaller state-based, I've done deals with state-based netball or cricket or whatever, and often they're shopping for a sponsor, or, they'll send out lots of proposals, or you might call them and yes, we've got room for another sponsor, because they're just looking for as much investment as they can, because we need to support those as well. But what the turn of the table here was that our brand had shifted so much in positioning and the way that we were received by consumers and the broader market in those last couple of years, so much that to have a brand like Football Australia approach us and want us to be their partner. And there, of course, we're talking to a number of different brands. And I don't know if this is just Tom saying nice things to me, but I do believe it. And it's been proven out since then that we want to work with, we've made a roster of brands. Subway is one that we absolutely want to align ourselves with, because the brand, values and the way that we operate and the people we connect with are very similar. Obviously, the green and yellow between our two brands, that was a nice, I guess, synergy that just happened to be there, which was really nice, and it fits really beautifully. But, for them to approach us because we're a brand that they want to work with, that wouldn't have happened, as I said, 2-3 years before that. So, and then since then, we've had we've been approached by them, a lot of other partners. So it's interesting what, that's why we made that difficult decision with Tennis Australia. We weren't ready. We wouldn't have done our brand any justice. And I think that's probably the biggest thing about where, a brand partnership sounds like a great idea, and it is. But everything else, your foundation needs to be right first. And the community thing for us was integral. And that's in January, we're going to launch our community partnerships program with Football Australia. We've already had, obviously, through the momentum that we've gained with both the Qatar World Cup and the Women's World Cup here in our backyard, and obviously the popularity and success of the Matildas in particular has just been phenomenal, and our whole network has already got behind it. So we did things like we ran restaurant decorating competitions, and I'll have to send you the photo of the winning restaurant. Everybody at every level across our network of 1,500 restaurants or 1,250 restaurants around Australia got right into it. And that's, when we've got sandwich artists who are 16, 17-year-old part-time kids who come in, do a shift. We've got middle-aged women who do this while their kids are at school. We've got business owners, those ma and pas. To see everybody, buy into this, to see the connection that football was able to make across Australia. Even non-football lovers were calling me saying, I'm now a convert. I love this so much. So to see the way that our network got involved in it was just phenomenal. And we even had a little girl named Matilda write to us. I'm showing you this card, but she wrote to us and said, I'm a Subway fan and I play football. She's from the ACT. As a sponsor, do you think you could send me any merchandise? And we actually did one better, and we sent her and her whole family up to watch the semi-final match in Sydney. So then they wrote us this most beautiful card just about how much it meant to her and her family, and it was the best time ever, and I'll always remember it for the rest of my life. And that's the power of sport, and that's the connectivity, and that's, I guess, having an authentic partnership where we can reach into where we operate, you know, and we gave them Subway vouchers, and they met our team, and we just, that's what it's about. So now we want to make sure that we can continue that momentum and leverage that, you know, even further with, as I said, this communities program that we're going to launch in January, just in time for the club sign-on season.
Well, it's terrific. I mean, can hear your passion, for the partnership. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask. Like, you know, you talked about, you know, our friends at Legal and terrific work getting the job done in 21 days. But sometimes partnerships can become quite rigid in here's the deliverables and here's what's expected and contracted. But sometimes you also have these moments like the Women's World Cup, like the wave that sort of took over Australia as they all followed the Matildas. Like, how are you able to, one, lean into that, you know, potentially, you know, upsize some of the things you were going to do? Some of it will be organic, like, you know, people decorating their stores. But are there things that you're like, this is a really big opportunity? We really can't just follow the plan that we had 18 months ago. It's been bigger. Have there been some adjustments? Have you pulled a few different levers as a result of the Women's World Cup and the impact that, you know, as much as everyone at Money in Sport was saying it's going to be a great tournament, I think it exceeded everybody's expectations. And so where does that leave you to sort of say, hey, this, you know, one, we've got this opportunity, you know, we've got these activation rights, what should we do with them?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I guess the good news was for us that there was a lot of, and you mentioned flexibility, and that's something that, as I mentioned earlier, we want to just do good work with good people. And we found that with the team at Football Australia, that they have been very flexible with us. Prime example, after the third place match here in Brisbane, the playoff there, they had a lot of the players had a lot of media engagements, as you can imagine, and then we had the Keys to the City presentation, and it was quite a big deal the next day. Then they were talking amongst their team, you know, we need to organise food and catering for the girls, and what are we going to do? And Taylor from the FA team said, well, why don't we just get Subway in here? Just something like, and then they filmed some content for us and they posted it. Stuff like that none of that was in our contract, that you have the opportunity to provide catering, and then we'll do content, and then we'll do, just really, that shows to us, it sounds small, but it's actually a really big thing, because especially at that time, the amount of viewers and fans that were engaging with the brand, for them to have, you know, that really authentic engagement between Subway, the Matildas, you know, in this high profile moment, was really valuable to us, and showed that that Football Australia values the partnership as much as we do. So trying to get us, you know, more access, more, I guess, visibility. And we did things like, you know, we had the Matilda send-off event in Fed Square in Melbourne, and we were able to sample, and there was so much great atmosphere there, as we all saw, and we were able to give some lucky members of our Subway network, you know, the opportunity to meet Matildas, which again, that engagement is really critical. So if they get involved and they get behind it, then the more successful this partnership is going to be, through the continuation of, you know, the plans that we've got, you know, for the next 2 or 3 years, because we don't see this, and this is another critical thing. This is not a 3-year. It's a 3-year contract with the option to renew, but we're not looking this from a brand perspective as a 3-year partnership. We're seeing this as a long-term opportunity. We want to build lasting relationships, and I know from my experience, as you've referenced before, that yields much better results. It's not a one and done. It's not, hey, we've got World Cup marquee events, let's do that. That's all wonderful, but it's about then, how do we inspire the next generation of footballers? How do we commit and connect in our communities? And that's what we're working on at the moment. So we're trying to, yes, we are investing our budget and adjusting some of our activities so that we continue to leverage the momentum that we've had and enjoyed from the Women's World Cup. And then it is very much entrenched and ingrained in the plan for 24 and beyond in what we're doing in community and in restaurants, connecting with clubs. So we're going to see, you'll see some big things coming at that club level next year.
Terrific. And yeah, you need to have that long-term view. Like you said earlier, I chatted with Will Hartnell at Geelong, and he talked about that 100-year, forward relationship and, effectively that equity, builds year on year. And, hopefully, the little girl that sends you a card is one day, playing for the Matildas, and you get to be, Subway gets to be part of that story. What I did want to do is just move away from the football piece and just talk about a couple of other campaigns, because I'm seeing them happening in the world of sport, and one is in the space of gaming and casual gaming. Lenny and the team at Tradable Bits did a presentation at SEAT with the guys at Maple Leaf Sports. They've been doing a lot of that stuff, and you ran something similar with the Sink a Sub campaign, using gaming to cut through, talk to a different audience. You want to tell us a little bit about that campaign and I guess the goals behind it and how it worked?
Sure. That was something that was born out of when we went to market for a new agency after I started about, repositioning the brand. One of the agencies pitched that as a concept because we had previously run a big traffic driving event globally around World Sandwich Day in November. And Global Office said, we're not doing it anymore, so cut that out. So we thought, well, what can we drop in here that's going to generate similar amount of traffic in that period? Because now we've got to cycle these results. How do we deliver on them? And so we put that out in the brief as one of the challenges, and one of the agencies came back with the Sink a Sub idea. So we ran Sink a Sub for 3 years, and essentially it was in our it didn't exist in our app yet, but you could scan the code if you bought a sub and a drink and get some tokens to play this game essentially, and then there'd be lots of prizes and opportunities to win. That was something very, very new and very different for us. Nobody in the Subway world had done any sort of gaming, campaigns or applications before. And the first year, it was a real success. And so we kept doing it. And because again, I'm someone who I don't want to just try something once and then move on and reinvent the wheel every time. We wanted to make sure that, okay, how can we optimize this? How can we do it better? And we took away lots of learnings, and it did drive traffic. We had great success with it. We're not doing it this year, and this would have been the fourth year. And the reason for that is it's exceptionally labour intensive and tech reliant, obviously. And from all of the learnings that we took, and we're in this digital transformation journey across the global Subway network, as I'm sure a lot of brands are, and trying to find our space in that. So it was, I guess, very successful in the metrics that we set up, but it became too labour intensive, and we're not set up to continue optimizing digitally just yet for us to make that worthwhile. So we made the decision to go in a different direction this year. But I believe, and we've been talking about this in terms of our planning for next year and how we're going to optimize our budget from media's point of view. We've never invested in gaming in that sense. And I know that there's so many examples of brands being immersed in gaming platforms and how they can build those meaningful interactions in a really genuine way. So we are exploring that, whether we go into existing gaming platforms, and our digital team and our agency digital team are very proactive in that space. So, yeah, I guess I don't know what that looks like yet, but we know that even though it was quite labour intensive for us and we don't have the resources to support it, we know the benefit that can come from it. So don't be surprised if you see Subway pop up in some gaming platform somewhere when you least expect it. Esports is another big area, and we're in discussions with the teams about that, and tournaments and how we can get into that. Because again, the people in our communities that are playing in our clubs, that are shopping in our restaurants, that are going to matches, are also in those platforms. So we need to try to connect those, and we realise how important that can be and what the value is there.
Definitely. The other one I want to ask, which sort of goes back to your sort of that disruptor, change things up outside the box, was Subway being in merchandise, and in this case, pool toys and budgie smugglers. And for those who don't know, my US friends, budgie smugglers are Speedos. And if you don't know what a budgie is, it's a small small bird, and that might explain why they're called budgie smugglers. But that's probably as far as I can go without playing around with the ratings on the podcast. But like,
just Google it.
Yeah. So, I wouldn't have, when I was doing some research, Subway and pool toys and budgie smugglers is not a, natural connection, but it really did help you cut through social media and really engage influencers, because it's really hard to say, hey, influencer, here is the sub, please take a bite out of it and put it up on Instagram. And they're just going to say no, they're not going to do it. It's not authentic. It looks too much like an ad. Was that sort of part of the thinking of, hey, we're going to put our brand over here, and it would have been something that the influencers embraced because it was a little bit different, a little bit off center?
Yeah, it's really interesting reflecting back on that, because we did the inflatable footlong promotion in our summer, and we just thought, again, we'd never done merchandising, and we thought we were still in that phase of brand building, and how do we make people think of Subway all the time in a fun way? Because what our consumer insights told us, again, people knew us, like it, but not enough to bother, is that we'd stopped being relevant. So we were trying to insert ourselves into these culturally relevant moments where there was a natural fit. And we were also on the hunt for how can we either cover things that are in the shape of a foot long, or how can we get in, buildings, metro, we were doing all sorts of exploration. And someone in the agency came up with this inflatable foot long. And we liked it, but again, we weren't set up for it. We'd never done it, and we didn't know how well it would do. So our analyst gave us some forecast figures on, this is what it could do, and we erred on the conservative side because it was a huge investment in production. So we did it, and we made a mistake of not reaching out to our field network, so our state sort of representatives in each of our markets, because when we actually presented the concept and we were about to launch it, they all said, this is going to go mental. You should have asked us, because we could have told you. So, but we just didn't, the money that I have to invest in marketing is franchisee money. So they pay a royalty to use the brand, and they pay an advertising fee. So every single dollar I have, I'm accountable to the franchisees. So having not done merchandising before, I also know the value of it, but given these things were huge and expensive, I didn't want to sit there in front of them and justify why we had to write off all this inflatable footlong stock. Thankfully, that didn't happen. We sold out within 10 days, and people were trading them. It was like this black market footlong inflatable commodity thing that was happening, and it was hugely successful. So I think what that showed us is that when you are culturally relevant, so summer, something fun, people respond to that. And that was something that was also driven out of the insights that said, while we love you, and yes, you're certainly starting to be more culturally relevant, the brand isn't seen as fun. So it's just not worth it for me. So we've been working really hard on that. And footlong inflatables did that. Budgie smugglers, again, did that. Got a slight slap on the wrist from the American team, because culturally, it's quite different. For us, those sorts of things in Australia and New Zealand are just, standard Aussie humour, standard Kiwi humour. But for the American team, that was a step too far, because, again, why would you put 6-inch and footlongs on budgie smugglers? But for us, that felt like just a really nice, irreverent, that's the brand sort of persona that we're trying to build, just a bit fun and irreverent. And it worked nicely for us. So
I can relate to that. Charlotte, who was on the panel at Money Sport, we do the stuff with NFL Australia, and there is definitely things that that work in the Australian market, the Australian sense of humour, where the line is in Australia. It's a little bit further along than it is in the US. There's a bit more being conservative, so I could understand that piece, but I can also understand. Why your franchisee said, this will go berserk. Can't wait for it, and that because they have that. They know the customer. They're talking to the customers every day. Like they can see that fun piece. So really fun. But I really can relate to that US and an Australian translation that sometimes you have to do back to HQ.
But I think it's proven as well, right? So success breeds freedom, and we're getting the results. And sometimes, even though they don't love it, they kind of have to swallow it down a little bit and go, okay, I understand that there's cultural nuances. And same back to us, America, our American marketing budget is vastly larger than ours here. There's 27,000 franchisees or so, stores there. So they've gone really hard in investing in the NFL over there, and then similarly individual athletes. So they've got everyone from the likes of Steph Curry to,
Patrick Mahomes.
I can't even remember now. Everybody,
yeah.
lots of. So they've got basketball, they've got gymnastics, they've got golf, so you name it. So they've invested multiple millions of dollars in sports. But the way that, and again, it's because that culturally over there, that influence of the sporting personalities themselves carries so much weight. Whereas here, it's not necessarily the same way. And then the way they've activated is very different to how we activate. So it's being authentic to your market and your customer as well is critically important.
One of the things I asked Annalise, who's working at UBS, around sponsorship, and one of her pet peeves was the amount of proposals she got after announcing that she just sponsored something.
Yes.
And so she said, please,
Yes.
If someone just announces, don't go and send a proposal because the budget just got assigned. Do you have any advice for sponsorship executives that are trying to pitch or are looking for something or are looking for sponsorship revenue? I mean, you talked about the persistence of time at FFA, but is there some advice you would give to either secure that lead or even just in that activation space that makes them a good partner?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I could not agree more. I got myself and Shane, we were bombarded every single day. Congratulations on the announcement. Here's, have you considered sponsoring everything? Yeah, literally everything from the smallest to the largest. And we don't have endless budget, unfortunately. But again, it's about we talk about in our team a lot, going deeper into something, not wider across multiple things. So we want to execute exceptionally well and do it justice. Tom's tenacity got me to have the phone call, but what actually clinched it, so that, I guess having a connection, something that's going to get that person's attention is important by making it as relevant as possible. And what actually clinched it for us was the proposal that he sent over, that he and Taylor had put together. It could not have been more personalized to Subway if I had done it myself, for example. Everything that they did in that showed how we could bring every single aspect of their what they were proposing for us to invest in to life. So it wasn't words on a page. It wasn't, there was the typical stuff about why football, fastest growing, but it really started with, here's the opportunity and why it's a great fit, and then visually showed us how this would be brought to life. And because they did that in such a genuine, thoughtful way, it made it hard for us to not at least have a conversation. So I think the advice I'd give, and because I receive plenty of proposals and calls and emails all the time, when it feels generic, I'm not even going to, and this sounds very arrogant, but we're all busy, right? So unless there is a hook that is directly relevant to me and my business and what I've got to work on and trying to deliver at that point in time, it's not worth. It's just, I'm not going to open it. And the relevance piece, that's what they did. So we were seeking relevance. They made it relevant to us, and it was hard to not at least have a conversation. And that's not just in sports partnerships. That's in anything. I receive multiple emails a day about anything from, do you need a new print partner, to here's how to amplify your social. If it feels generic, and 99.9% of them do, there's no point. It's not going to get my attention. But when it feels like my brand even just a little bit, and how, and you're telling me how you can help me achieve my goals, then I'm interested in having a conversation. So the advice that I would give is make it authentic. Don't just blanket send out every single business that you've Googled that you think might have budget. If it's not authentic, then, you're going to spot it from a mile away, and it's not going to be beneficial in pursuing anyway. So yeah, we all have measurable goals. And I think that's then the return advice for anyone thinking about doing and entering into a partnership and investing in it is, for me, very much based on experience, is make sure your house is in order first, your brand is in the right position, you have the right resourcing and backing of the team and the brand and the business to support it and deliver it. Because just whacking a logo on it isn't going to return. And understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. What are your objectives before you go into it? Don't just go hunting for a brand that's looking for a partner. It needs to be really measurable. And is it about brand visibility? Is it about fan engagement? Is it about sales? It's always about sales. We're all here to sell stuff. So establish that first and make sure that, the brand can deliver to that, as opposed to just being sexy. And because it's easy to get carried away and you go, oh, our brand up in lights, but ultimately what's it going to deliver? So yeah, house in order first, and then an authentic partnership that is true to what your objectives are.
Well, I'll make the same advice when I spoke to Annalise. If anyone sends Rodica a pitch deck on the back of listening to this podcast, please send it my way, and Liam Neeson style, I'll hunt you down. So please don't do that. Please reach out and say thank you for listening to the podcast and asking for insights, but don't send a pitch just because you listen to the podcast. Rodica, I want to finish with the Sports Geek closing five. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Do you know what? I played a lot of sports growing up, and I'm Romanian by origin. So like all good Romanian girls, I did a lot of gymnastics. So it would have been, I can't remember the exact year, but the World Gymnastics Championships came to Brisbane, and I went to that, and just, sucked it up as much as I could. I saw a lot of my heroes there, and I'm going to date myself now by saying Monique Allen was the hero of Australian gymnastics, and to see her live was just, see her performing on beam very close to me was a dream come true, because that's all I had aspired to do. And then she came to one of my gymnastics clinic camps that we were away at Curramundi Lake, and she helped me do a backflip on the beam. And that's just a moment that I'll never forget, seeing an idol on a world platform and then having, that connection to club. So that's why I think that's so powerful. And then obviously been to a lot of, since then, I guess, NRL, State of Origin, and lots and lots and lots of AFL. Bombers all the way. Can I say that? Bombers all the way.
As a Collingwood supporter, no, you can't. I've lost you now. That's it. The interview ends.
Yes, that's it. Done.
You would have been to a lot of sports events in your time. Do you have a favourite food at a sports event? We don't have any Subways activated inside stadiums yet, do we? Like, we do have some sort of co-branded, like in the States, a few have, different QSRs inside some of the bigger stadiums, but it's not really something that happens in Australia. So do you have a go-to food when you go to an Essendon game or go to a game up in Brisbane?
I do. It's salt and vinegar chips and a Coke Zero every time, hands down, no matter what it is. Or hot chips. But watch this space. You might see some Subways pop up in stadiums.
Oh, that'd be interesting to see. What's the first app you open in the morning?
Probably my work email. How sad is that? And then the weather app.
No, that's all right. It's different from everybody.
And news. Yeah.
Is there someone that you follow? It might be an author that you follow, or someone that you read, which is what an author would be, stupidly, that you follow that you suggest the listeners should follow.
I don't think that I follow anyone that's not too popular, to be honest. I mean, being a marketing geek, I'm a Mark Ritson diehard fan. So obviously Mark Ritson, anything he writes, popular culture and just, ways of thinking. Mark Manson. And they both swear a lot, so I can align with that. TED Talks and anything by Brené Brown.
Okay. Yep. All good recommendations. Lastly, what social media platform is your MVP? And you can answer that personally, and then potentially what's the platform that's working the best for Subway at the moment?
The platform that's working the best for Subway at the moment is actually Instagram. We seem to have, we've really worked hard on our food photography, and, there's this whole thing around food porn, and we're dialing up our crave. And so we seem to get a lot of good engagement there, but also it translates into sales, so we can directly measure that impact, which has been fantastic. I'm trying to get across the talk, because I don't TikTok, and I know I should, and it just makes me feel old, but that is huge, in culture, in sport, and certainly in QSR, but more importantly, our consumers, the consumers who consume both sport and food, and we're trying to be relevant to culture, then we need to be there. So that's probably a big one that I'm trying to get across.
Be very careful. It's a rabbit hole.
I know.
You start following a few things.
I already have enough trouble. Yeah.
Yeah. You follow a few of the things that you like, and you follow a few creators. Then guess what? You start getting more of those. The algorithm is very good. Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about, because that happens to me. I fall into Instagram deep dark holes. So anyway, but they're certainly working for us, and I know that that's something that we're actively pursuing with our target audience.
Well, the good thing about that rabbit hole is, as we're both marketers, you realise that customers will fall down that rabbit hole, and so if you execute it correctly, you can reach those customers.
That's
right. That's the glass half full. After you've done 4 hours watching TikToks, you go, "Oh, it was all marketing research. It's going to help me go forward."
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Rodica. I really enjoyed catching up with you again. What is the best platform for people to reach out and say, "Hey, I really enjoyed the episode"? Would that be LinkedIn?
Yeah, absolutely. Send me a message on LinkedIn, and don't send me proposals there. But unless it's super relevant and you think it's going to make us lots of money for Subway franchisees. But yes.
Well, terrific. Well, hopefully I will catch a Matildas or a Socceroos game with you in the near future. But really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Sean, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Learn from the Sports Geek Amplify Season 2 cohort. Trajectory, Xtonet, SeatGeek, Sponsor CX, and Stats Perform. For more, go to sportsgeekamplify.com.
Thanks again to Rodica. Please feel free to connect with her on LinkedIn. Tell her that you listen to the podcast. But as I gave the same stern warning to with my episode with Annalise at UBS, please do not pitch for sponsorship in that approach. Listening to the podcast does not give you that right. And I think you pretty much would have got that very clearly from the interview. Thank you very much, Rodica, for the time. Before I wrap up this episode, I just want to ask you as listeners around your AI strategy. Do you have an AI strategy? Do you understand what AI could offer? Do you have an executive or CEO that doesn't quite know what AI might be? Do you have an IT security folk that's trying to lock down everything that has AI related? Are you trying to figure out how to work with AI partners, whether they be artists or different things? Do you know what tools you're currently working and probably already integrated with ChatGPT, and you're probably not using the full potential of those tools? One of the things that we're looking at, and I'm always diving in on the tools and the process and how to improve workflows and content workflows and make teams work more efficiently. AI provides a lot in that space. So if it's something if it's an itch you want to scratch, if it's something that you're interested in, it's ideal for potentially Pick My Brain session. Simply go to the site, sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain, or send me an email, send me a DM at Sean Callanan or Sean at sportsgeekhq.com. I would love to hear from you and try to help you solve some of your problems using some of the AI tools that are available. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan, and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Looking to help your digital or sponsorship team? Book in for a Pick My Brain session with Sean Callanan to help your team level up. Book now at sportsgeekhq.com/pickmybrain. Want to help drive more revenue from your digital efforts? Book a time for a call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call.